Joining me now, someone who knows quite a bit about the presidency. He served as a senior advisor to both Presidents Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. He is our friend Patrick J. Buchanan. Pat, it's great to have you back on America's Forum.
Good to talk with you, J.D.
Now, Pat, what do you make of the president getting off the plane last night and what he had to say, taking Republicans to task in Congress over this immigration crisis?
Well, I think that the President of the United States is a portrait and a dereliction of duty here. He's got an obligation to defend, a constitutional obligation to defend the borders of the United States. He said he was doing it. Transparently, he is not doing it. And the idea that he's out there in Denver playing pool and drinking beer suggests a certain amount of contempt for the people who are concerned about this issue, who have raised this issue and correctly made it an issue. For it is about, J.D., the security and survival of the United States of America as one nation and one people.
Pat, you have worked in a couple of White Houses. You've been in charge of communications, helping to get out the message. The only thing I could figure with the president the other day with the pool hall and the beer drinking was trying to take away from the story that Senator Udall and other top Democrats were not going to appear with him in a public forum, that he tried to supersede it with that. Is this a sign of a White House and a president increasingly out of touch or just consumed with politics?
You know, J.D., here, I was communications director of the White House for the great communicator himself. And if I were director of communications for President Obama, I would have, in the meeting, I would have said, sir, let me repeat. Now, I know what you said. You are putting out a message of indifference to what is happening on the border when the whole country is consumed by it, especially the American Southwest. You're going to go to Texas and you're not going to the border. Sir, do you understand the message you are sending to the American people, which is either I don't give a hoot or nobody's going to tell me what I have to do and nobody's going to tell me what my obligations and duties are. But really it is a manifest message of really that I really don't give a damn about what is going on in the American border. I'll give them $4 billion and tell them to fix it.
Pat, your new book, and I love the title, The Greatest Comeback, How Richard Nixon Rose from Defeat to Create a New Majority. We think about, you talked about Reagan as the greatest communicator, Nixon with the greatest comeback after losing the presidency to Jack Kennedy, building a new majority, albeit a silent majority. Nixon in terms of foreign policy, with a Marine sitting in a jail in Mexico, with the continued invasion of our southern border. What would Richard Nixon be doing today were he sitting in the Oval Office right now?
J.D., he would already have called the president of Mexico and said, stop playing around and turn that Marine loose. And secondly, if you don't stop these trains and buses from crossing your territory and taking these children up to our border and pushing them into the United States, we are really going to seal the entire border, and maybe none of your exports will get into the United States. Now get that job done. You know what's happening to our country. This is an unfriendly act on the part of the Mexican government. And then I'd get those 3 Central American presidents on the phone and tell them the same thing. That we've given you foreign aid, we give you trade benefits. Your whole economies depend on exports to the United States. If you don't want us to virtually break relations with you, you deal with this problem. I don't understand what the President of the United States is doing, shooting pool. And when when the real threat to the security of the country, and as I say, to the survival of the country, the message that is going out to the world and to Latin America is, get into the United States, walk across the border, get in free. They'll put you into some kind of legal process, and it's ollie in free.
Pat, as you mentioned, a very different approach you believe Richard Nixon would take. Here we are on really, a month away from the 40th anniversary of Richard Nixon's resignation, and predictably he has been pilloried in history by those on the left, and a generation has grown up not knowing Richard Nixon or knowing him as the president who resigned. Your new book, The Greatest Comeback, what do you want readers to gain from your portrait of Nixon and what went on with him, both in terms of politics and policy during the 1970s?
Well, in this book, which deals with Richard Nixon's comeback and his defeat by Jack Kennedy, and then his crushing defeat for governor of California, his last press conference where he said, "You're not going to have me to kick around anymore," and then the tremendous defeat our party suffered, JD. I was a Goldwater man in 1964, and in 1965 he leaves California, he goes to New York to practice law, and he decides to go out and try to rebuild this shattered, broken party, and at the same time rebuild his career. And he moves through 1968, helps win a huge victory. And in that year, 1968, the Tet Offensive, Lyndon Johnson being broken, his presidency broken, Robert Kennedy getting into the race, Martin Luther King murdered in Memphis, riots in 100 American cities. Bobby Kennedy was killed a week after I saw him out in the Oregon primary. Democratic Party comes apart in the streets of Chicago. Through that year of turmoil and turbulence and division and war and rancor, how did Richard Nixon, twice defeated candidate, not charismatic, middle American, maneuver through that period to wind up raising his hand and taking the oath of office as President of the United States? It is an incredible story. I don't care whether you like him or dislike him, especially if you dislike him, here is how perseverance, patience, drive, determination, and a willingness to get up again and fight, even when you're out, I think pays off.
Pat, a lot of people are very excited about this book. Newsmax magazine has a cover featuring Richard Nixon on newsstands this month. You have your book already a bestseller at Amazon.com, so there is a great deal of interest in Richard Nixon. Is there one anecdote, one vignette, one thing with Dick Nixon that might surprise people who have accepted a historical caricature of the man?
Yeah, there are a number of things, but one of them is I've never met a man who was more receptive to arguments he disagreed with. I mean, I was a Goldwater conservative when I went to work for him, but he called me into his office before he hired me, and he questioned me for 3 hours on foreign policy, defense policy, the conservative movement, who's rising there, who are the great columnists, every issue. And one time I wrote him a memo saying, look, this fella, he writes for the New Republic. I said, he's a young guy, he's a young star there, but he is far to the left, way outside of your viewpoint, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President. And he said, I don't care. He said, first, I like some of the ideas he's writing, some of them. Secondly, if we ever hire somebody like this and you get into a fight, you will find out at the end of the fight, he's a loyalist just like all the rest of us. He understood that once you got into a battle, JD, you were all together, you all had the same sort of memories, and you all had the same friends and the same adversaries. And it happened again and again. Look who he brought into the White House. Pat Moynihan, Jack Kennedy's man. He brings in John Connally, Lyndon Johnson's man, and Henry Kissinger for his foreign policy, Nelson Rockefeller's man.
A reassessment or a rearticulation of the political and public policy prowess of one Richard Milhouse Nixon, as we see pictures in the latest cover of Newsmax magazine. Pat, one of my privileges is getting to know guys like you during my service in Congress. Also got to know Lynn Nofziger, who served as an advisor, as you did, to both Nixon and Reagan. Lynn was saying to me one day in the Capitol that there was no one who could encapsulate a message like Richard Nixon to paint the picture, and that included Ronald Reagan. Is that a fair assessment?
It is. I mean, what Reagan was great at, he was a man of the 30s, an era of patriotism, and he would get up and he could speak so well about the country and everything. But if you talk about an issue and get it honed down, I used to do the briefing books for Richard Nixon for all the 6 years of his presidency, and he would keep telling me, Pat, get it down, the answers you send in to 100 words. Then he would get those and he would rewrite notes. I've got them all outlined in his briefing books. And he would get up in a press conference and like a student, and he would hit every single point. And in terms of encapsulation, in reducing an argument to simplicity and something people could understand, how else, JD, could someone, Richard Nixon's not charismatic personality, not somebody that's going to see a big figure on television, how else could he win 49 states of the Union?
And we're going
after
to find
that
out.
decade of the 60s.
That's right. The way we find out, of course, Pat, is to pick up your new book, The Greatest Comeback, How Richard Nixon Rose from Defeat to Create a New Majority. Patrick J. Buchanan, always a pleasure to have you here on Newsmax TV. We look forward to our next visit.
Always good to talk to you, JD.
So you have Pat Buchanan's take. What's yours on Dick Nixon? Love to hear from you. Tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum.